everybody. Welcome to Fun with Genes. And no, I don't mean blue genes, I mean human genes, as in the very pieces of information that make up how we are and how we look. We briefly covered the importance of genes and chromosomes in class when we talked about how chromosomes replicate during the process of mitosis and how these chromosomes contain genetic information within them, which is essential to a cell and to the human body as a whole. We also learned a bit about DNA as well. In this video, we are going to dig a bit deeper in the field of genetics. Let's start with some basics. What is the study of genetics? Well, genetics is the biological study of hereditary and inherited characteristics from one generation to the next. By that, I mean physical traits that are passed down from generation to generation. Gregor Mendel, also known as the father of genetics, first observed genetics in action when he crossbred various types and species of plants to see which traits were passed down and which traits weren't. From this, he concluded that some traits are dominant over others, meaning that these traits are passed down to the offspring. Those traits that aren't passed down are considered to be recessive. So far, we've determined that chromosomes contain genes, and genes contain genetic information. But how exactly is that information stored? Well, it is stored in DNA. DNA, aka deoxyribonucleic acid, try saying that 10 times really fast, is basically made up of nucleotides. If that word confuses you, just think of nucleotides as chains of proteins because that's all they really are. These chains of proteins bond to one another and create the swirly shape of the DNA known as the double helix. To further understand genes, we must now talk about homozygous and heterozygous genotypes. IBT nerds say, what? If this sounds complicated for you, well, chilling's down, my friends. I will generalize it for you so y'all understand what I'm talking about. Before we continue, we must first know the difference between a gene and an allele. A gene is a hereditary characteristic that is passed down from a parent to the offspring. Eye color would be a perfect example of a gene. An allele, on the other hand, is how a certain gene is expressed. Let's take the example with eye color again. If the eye color is the gene, then the allele would be the different types of eye colors. For example, blue eye color, or green eye color, or even brown eye color would all be examples of alleles for the eye color gene. Now let's say we live in a world where people can only have either blue eyes, with the symbol being a lowercase b, or brown eyes, with the symbol being an uppercase b. A woman is pregnant and is about to have a baby. The father has brown eyes and the mother has blue eyes. Therefore, the father possesses a gene with the allele capital B, and the mother possesses a gene with the allele lowercase b. The baby will have a genotype of capital B, lowercase b. The genotype is the combination of the mother and father. Now we have a problem. How can the baby have two different eye colors? It is possible to have two different eye colors. It's called heterochromia iridium, but we are going to talk about that in the mutation section. The body must choose which eye color to express, but it doesn't just do this based on what color it likes or prefers. There is a structure on how to choose, and it is all about dominance. In this case, some colors dominate over others, and the body chooses based on that. Let's go back to our example. Capital B and lowercase b is a heterozygous genotype, meaning that it contains two different alleles, an uppercase b and a lowercase b. An example of a homozygous genotype would be lowercase b, in which both alleles are identical. In this case, let's say brown eyes are dominant and blue eyes are recessive. In the case of the heterozygous genotype, capital B and lowercase b, brown would be more dominant, therefore the baby would have brown eyes. If the baby were to have the homozygous genotype of lowercase b, then he or she would have blue eyes, because the two B alleles are equally dominant. Does this necessarily mean that the baby will have brown eyes? Nope. Haha, I got you there, didn't I? This just means that the baby has the most likely chance of having brown eyes. There is still a chance that the baby will have blue eyes, and we can find out the percentage of chance by drawing a Punnett square. Square, 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 squares, I love squares. We have determined that the mother has blue eyes, therefore her allele would be lowercase b, one B from her mother and one B from her father. The father of the child has brown eyes. His allele would be capital B, lowercase b, where his mom has brown eyes and his father has blue eyes. Now let's draw the Punnett square. Now let's talk about mutations. Yay! A genetic mutation is caused by change in the DNA sequence that makes up a gene. It can range from a single DNA building block, a DNA base, to a large segment of a chromosome. This change, called a mutation, can have an impact on the phenotype of an organism. The phenotype is the resulting trait that gets passed down. While in the case of a mutation, that phenotype can change. Mutation rates are usually very low, 1 in every 10 to 100 million bases, due to the ability of DNA to proofread. just like how a student would proofread after taking a test. However, errors occasionally occur during the process of DNA replication, making mutations possible. Errors also occur sometimes when you proofread your work. You know that moment when you get your test back and you're all like, OMG, I proofread my work and yet I still made that mistake. And you go off and whine like a baby? Well, that just proves how imperfect we humans are and how imperfect our bodies are as well. But that's okay because we all make mistakes, and just like how we have the tendency to learn from our mistakes, so do our bodies. Now, going back to gene mutations, we'll talk about 3 different examples of mutations. First off, we'll begin with heterochromia iridium. Oh snap, fancy word. Then I will talk about chimera, and lastly I will talk about Down syndrome. Let's begin with heterochromia iridium. In Greek, heteros means different, and chroma means color, and iridium means iris. So basically, heterochromia iridium means different colored iris. It is when people or animals have 2 different colored eyes. For example, one eye of the person or animal is blue and the other is black. 2 genes control our eye color, EYCL3, which is found in chromosome 15 and is code for brown and blue eye color. The second gene is EYCL1, which is found in chromosome 19 and is code for green and blue eyes. When a person's eyes are different colors, it has to do with the melanocytes, cells that manufacture pigment or color. Well, you may be asking yourself, well, gee, what could possibly go wrong? Well, that is where you are wrong. The melanocytes can get lost. Most melanocytes are produced in one location in our bodies called the utero, and they have individual destinations. Waardenburg syndrome is a genetic mutation that results in wayward melanocytes, which means that the melanocytes never find their way to the iris like they're supposed to. Sometimes only some of the melanocytes get lost, which results in patches of different colors in the same eye. Iris color develops during the first few months after birth, and with the levels of melanin determine how dark the eyes are going to be. Less melanin means lighter eyes, and more melanin means darker eyes. Sometimes the concentration and distribution of melanin isn't correct, which leads to heterochromia. You can either have this mutation by birth, or it could be passed down through your family, or due to an injury or disease. There are no dangers related with heterochromia. Now let's move on to chimera. A chimera is basically an extension of heterochromia iridium. And no, when I say chimera, I don't mean the Marvel superhero. I also don't mean the ancient Greek myth where the chimera is known to be a fire-breathing female monster with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail. I'm talking about a scientific chimera in which 2 fertilized eggs have fused together. This can happen using genetic engineering processes like transfusion or transplantation. It can also be inherited. That's why you can see more than one chimera cat on this earth. There are more animal chimeras than human ones. Try not to confuse a chimera with a hybrid. A hybrid organism is when, say, 2 animals mate together. There will be some recessive and dominant features from both parents found in their child. Chimera is different because it's when both zygote genes fuse together. In other words, it's like 2 people being fused into one. This one person doesn't hear any thoughts from the second, but when you have chimeras, you have different traits from normal humans or animals and coloration. For example, you can have 2 blood types or 2 colored irises in one eye. The first chimera was a sheep-goat created in 1984. It had the head of a goat and the woolly coat of a sheep. Scientists did this and still experiment today so that they can find solutions, further develop this field of biology, fix diseases, and develop organs for future transplant patients. Now, remember the time when we discussed about Down syndrome in class? If you don't, then let me just say you have terrible memory, my friend. Just kidding! If you remember, then great. If not, don't fret. Let's review. We learned that this condition causes a child to get an extra chromosome. Now we'll go further into detail. The occurrence of Down syndrome, aka trisomy 21, is present in approximately 1 in every 800 babies born in Canada. In this chromosomal condition, extra genetic material causes delays in the way a child develops, both mentally and physically. As you may already know, each human cell contains normally 23 pairs of different chromosomes. Each of these chromosomes carries genes which are responsible for our individual characteristics, as well as proper development and maintenance of our bodies. At the time of conception, a baby inherits genetic information from its parents in the form of 46 chromosomes, 23 from the mother and 23 from the father. However, in Down syndrome, an individual regularly inherits 2 copies of chromosome 21 from the mother and 1 chromosome 21 from the father, adding a total of 3 chromosomes 21. It's this extra genetic material that causes the physical features and the developmental delays associated with Down syndrome. Although there's no way to prevent the chromosomal errors that cause Down syndrome, scientists are making steady progress in understanding the functions of individual genes through human studies and animal models. Now, for all of those fellow classmates who are dying for this video to be over, well, it's your lucky moment. This is our video on genes, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope that you learned something new today. Thank you very much for watching.